From Recorded Future News and PRX, this is Click Here. The world is watching Ukraine. The war, the weapons, the peace talks. But in the background, there's another place caught in the shadow of a powerful neighbor, one that, like Russia, insists history was never settled, and that's Taiwan. China claims the island is a renegade province, the kind of language that sounds like it could just as easily come from Vladimir Putin as from Xi Jinping. The threats have loomed for both Ukraine and Taiwan for years, but for Taiwan, there's sort of a due date, 2027. That's the year, allegedly, Xi Jinping told the military to be ready to invade Taiwan. And as the date ticks closer, you can already hear rumblings of the conflict, especially in cyberspace. China's cyber attacks against the island nation have been ramping up.
China is getting more and more aggressive, especially in terms of the cyber attacks.
Cyber attacks launched on Taiwan's public websites.
It attacked thousands of email accounts of government officials to steal important data.
For Nina Collars, a professor at the U.S. Naval War College, the war in Ukraine wasn't just another geopolitical flashpoint. She thought it was something that could be studied not just for its own sake, but on behalf of Taiwan.
So I said, hey, maybe we should think about this. Maybe the things that are happening in Ukraine will help us understand what it takes to operate under maybe a crisis. And so maybe we can kind of apply these lessons. So we referred to that as the Zelensky playbook.
Nina's work at the Naval War College involves the kind of academic research you'd expect, but also this other thing.
So the Naval War College has got this sort of storied history of wargaming.
This is Jay Vogt, and he works at the Naval War College with Nina in the war gaming department. That's right, they actually have a war gaming department.
And what they do is they put on usually 8 to 10 very large, usually classified war games at the direction of this chief of naval operations every year.
So Jay and Nina start asking, what if we run one of those war games for Taiwan?
It struck me as being this kind of perfect opportunity to really dig down into something that the Navy is deeply concerned about, that frankly, the Pentagon is deeply concerned about. So we just decided to ask a very simple question. And as is usually the case when Jay and I team up, shenanigans ensue. And then we got this crazy idea to play a war game at DEF CON.
I'm Dina Temple-Raston, and this is Click Here, a podcast about all things cyber and intelligence. We tell true stories about the people making and breaking our digital world. And today, we're looking at Taiwan and how you prepare for a war that hasn't even started yet. We'll take you inside a Navy war game designed to help Taiwan get ready. A war game held, for the first time ever, in a very unexpected place. Stay with us.
This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting to get your money back, which turned into worrying about getting your money back. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes today and help you get up to a $4,000 refund advance loan fast. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Refund has $0 loan fees and 0% APR. Refund advance loans may be issued by First Century Bank N.A. or WebBank. Terms apply, subject to credit approval.
Click Here is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Make another smart choice with Auto Quote Explorer to compare rates from multiple car insurance companies all at once. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary on how you buy. From Recorded Future News, this is Click Here, I'm Dina Temple-Raston. The connection between Ukraine and Taiwan is clear. Both are smaller nations standing at the edge of digital battlegrounds, caught between cyber superpowers. But after that, the differences are striking.
The difficulty that the Taiwanese face from a security perspective is far, far more dire than that of the Ukrainians. They're a small island, there are shallow waters.
It's, heavily reliant on cables and all these other types of things. 90% of its internet is dependent on subsea cables, right? That's how most of the traffic is going back and forth.
The fact that Ukraine has borders, land borders, points to another distinction between the two countries. That means it's harder for Russia to fully shut down Ukraine's communication systems. In fact, when Russia attempted to do that, Ukraine literally just drove their hard drives across the border to reestablish connections elsewhere. But Taiwan's data only has one way off the island, through those undersea cables, many of which are connected to China.
Do Taiwan's cables get cut? Yes, they do, right? It's happened like 27 times over the last 5 years. I will tell you that the deputy minister of MODA absolutely believes it's being done on purpose, right?
MODA, that's Taiwan's Ministry of Digital Affairs. So Jay and Nina begin researching all these distinctions.
So we thought once we had enough there, we said, okay, let's create a game.
Actually, that's where Jay comes in. He's a war game designer. And given Taiwan's particular vulnerabilities, they decided to focus the game on 3 things. First, protecting the island's communications networks and the infrastructure that depends on them.
Compared to Ukraine, compared to a lot of places, Taiwan is one of the most digitally sort of robust and sort of connected nations on the world. So there's a lot of opportunity there for cyber attacks and other types of means of disruption.
So not just cutting cables, but hacking systems, which China already does regularly. In fact, just last week, the cybersecurity company Cisco Talos discovered a malicious campaign inside Taiwan's critical infrastructure. They said the hackers have been active in these networks since at least 2023, and they linked them to the Chinese Ministry of State Security. And if there was a full-on war, staying connected would not just be about communicating on the island, but also about keeping the rest of the world informed and engaged, rallying support, like President Zelensky did from day one with his selfie video from Kyiv.
Слава нашим захисникам, слава нашим захисницям.
Zelensky was able to pivot right after the Russian attacks and really make his case to the world. If you're Taiwan and you are down to a soda straw in terms of the number of communications pathways you have, you might not be able to do that as effectively, right? There might be a lot less videos online posted from the population about what's going on because that stuff's just not getting out.
And then the third area they decided to focus the war game on was energy. Taiwan is going green not just for the environment, but to be less dependent on outside energy. Because right now, some 97% of their oil and gas is shipped in.
So it's a big problem for them. So they're going big into this green energy space. And we realized pretty quickly that this is potentially an area of vulnerabilities.
Not because green energy itself is less secure, but because any time you stitch together new systems, it's complicated. And the complexity leads to vulnerabilities. So telecoms, infrastructure, energy. Nina and Jay had chosen their war game focus.
Then Jay said, Nina, this is impossible. How are we going to find the expertise to do this? And I said, oh, hold my beer. We can just go to DEF CON.
DEF CON, the world's largest hacking conference.
This is the welcoming session. So with that, welcome to DEF CON. I am the Dark Tangent.
DEF CON isn't just a bunch of dirty hackers, right? These were maybe dirty hackers 33 years ago, but now these are people who run the community, right?
It's a place that brings together thousands of hackers, security researchers, intelligence officials, and government operatives to trade knowledge, to push the boundaries of cybersecurity, to break into things just to see if they can.
And I said, well, the thing is, we could take it and play it on the floor and find out who wants to think about this problem with us, among 25 or 30,000 of the world's best hackers.
For context, war games are usually played in stuffy rooms, think tanks, institutions like the Hoover Institution. Usually, people take off work. They fly across the country and sit in rooms filled with government officials and military strategists. But DEF CON? It would flip that model on its head. Instead of bringing the experts to the war game, they would bring the war game to the experts.
And so my colleagues were like, that's pretty crazy, but let's see if we can give it a shot.
So they started recruiting.
The hacking community operates off a trusted introduction system, so
hackers can be suspicious by nature, especially of institutions. So if Nina wanted to recruit people for this kind of thing, she'd probably need people to vouch for her. People who could say that this was the real deal or somebody's time. Fortunately, Nina had actually been going to DEF CON for years by then. She volunteers there and runs a maritime hacking village at the conference.
I immediately reached out to people I knew best, and I said, this is what we're thinking about doing. Can you find me the kinds of people with expertise on industrial control systems, on renewable energy, on the communications infrastructure and how it works? And can you bring enough of them together if they're coming to DEF CON?
She started sending messages.
And so slowly but surely, the networks light up and I get text messages back, my friend of a friend, you should invite this person. So we built out a list.
A list that, as it turns out, was longer than they expected. More people than they could even use. Because if you're a hacker and you get a message from the U.S. Navy that says,
hey, are you interested in thinking through this puzzle with us? We're going to play a war game.
No one needs to ask you twice.
It's a very, very hard problem, which is part of, I think, one, the hacker community loves hard problems.
They had their scope, they had their players, they were ready. But could all of this plan, this war game, actually hold up under the chaos of DEF CON? Let the war games begin. That's after the break. Stay with us. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Therapy should feel accessible, not like a luxury. With online therapy from BetterHelp, you get quality care at a price that makes sense. And it's convenient. You can join a session with a click of a button, helping you fit therapy into your busy life. Plus, you can switch therapists at any time. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 5 million people globally. Your well-being is worth it. Visit BetterHelp.com/click here to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/click here.
There's a lot going on right now. Mounting economic inequality, threats to democracy, environmental disaster, the sour stench of chaos in the air. I'm Brooke Gladstone, host of WNYC's On the Media. Want to understand the reasons and the meanings of the narratives that led us here, and maybe how to head them off at the pass? That's On the Media's specialty. Take a listen wherever you get your podcasts.
If you've never been to DEF CON, it's hard to describe how incredibly chaotic it is. It is literally tens of thousands of people sprawling across a massive convention center in Las Vegas. It's a sea of hackers, cybersecurity researchers, government types. And somewhere in the middle of all that, Nina and Jay decided to host a war game. Right away, things didn't go as planned. And it started with the load-in, or setup day.
So we load in. We find out fairly quickly that the space we thought we were going to have on the DEF CON floor was not the space that
you ended up with.
We needed.
Shocker. Shocker.
We thought we would have kind of a private space that would curtain off and we could offer a little more anonymity to our players.
Right.
But that's not the way it turned out.
Instead of a semi-private space, they were dropped right into the chaos.
We're in this giant Las Vegas Convention Center, which is home to, every vehicle sports expo, boat expo, right? These are giant stadium-sized rooms. So we were right in the middle. We were down there on the floor.
Right next to the biohacking village, just a stone's throw from the famous DEF CON tinfoil hat competition.
So the tinfoil hat people were over in lane 1.
They give you 4 sheets of tinfoil, and you're supposed to build a hat that will shield your subversive thoughts.
Make a hat! Make a hat! Make a hat! Make a hat! Woo!
But you don't just build it, you actually test it on a mannequin head. There's even a scoring system, because this is DEF CON.
And it's the sheer amount of sound, and DARPA had this AI thing across the way, and they kept lowering the lights, and so we kept complaining and having them raise the lights again. It was a lot.
They took all of this in, the din, the crowds, the flashing lights, and then
Jay turned to me and he said, "We just got to suck it up and do this."
They pulled together 2 round tables, laid out a giant map of the island, and then a bunch of smaller maps of Taiwan's infrastructure. Its power plants, its phone lines.
And Ed McGrady, who had come with us, he was the map designer, and Jay, they were all on the floor there trying to bring the players over and get them oriented.
They started setting up the teams.
The way the game was set up was they were divided into 3 teams, usually of like 4 or 5 people each. We tried to get mixes of skill sets, right? So it wasn't just all the threat intel people on one side. And then we put them in the role of the advisors to the Taiwanese government.
In this game, everyone was on Team Taiwan. No one would be playing as if they were mainland China. So Nina and Joe briefed the teams on the basics.
On the lay of the land in Taiwan in terms of what does its communications look like? What does its energy and data kind of work like?
Then they laid out 2 attack scenarios, 2 different crises.
One was cyber attacks, electronic warfare, and then the second scenario was a kinetic one or a conventional strike one, where a lot of the stuff that had been sort of cyber attack is now literally getting blown up.
Jay laid all this out, and the war games begin.
And Ed and Jay start going, and they're telling people where to look on the map, and they're telling them, how to submit their moves, and we're adjudicating their moves.
They watched, observed, took notes.
You've got the players in the middle, and you've got rings of people staring at the people who are playing the game, and there's just a lot of discussion. What is this? And they're rambunctious, and they're loud, and they're having a good time.
Then time was up. A round of thanks, a handshake, a challenge coin parting gift. Military loves challenge coins. It was stamped with a Formosan bear on one side and a plum blossom on the other. Symbols of resilience, symbols of identity. And then everyone just kind of disappeared into the crowd, leaving Nina and Jay to figure out what it all meant. And what surprised them the most?
They kept wanting to talk about, what is the population doing? What are their habits? How do we prepare them for what's about to happen to them?
And why do you think that was?
I think that seasoned veterans of cybersecurity have evolved into an understanding that the technology won't be the answer. It is the tool. But if your population isn't prepared to leverage it, nothing's going to get better. It was fascinating. Yeah.
As they dug more into the recommendations, they seemed to fall into 3 main areas. First, a better cyber education. Second, build a hacker core.
And then making choices about what that hacker core would be able to do. Would they be able to stand up their own mesh network? Would they be able to just, reset the Wi-Fi?
And finally, the third lesson. That was about energy. The players suggested Taiwan lean even harder into going green.
They all wanted to increase resilience by adding solar or wind elements to their power grids to kind of ensure access to energy. But then they differed on where they would place these assets.
Taiwan is covered in mountain ranges.
And so the idea was, well, given that we think there could be jamming and maybe some kinetic, missile fires, let's hide everything behind the mountain range on the east side.
They were a little surprised by this emphasis on going green.
Because it's unclear yet how these new emerging technologies could or could not be cyber insecure. And so we found that it is an interesting solution.
Oh, that's interesting. I bet they didn't think of that. They more just thought, we need electricity.
I think that's right.
One of the goals of bringing this game to DEF CON, as opposed to only consulting government and military people, was to find new ways to engage the private sector. That's one of the key lessons from 3 years of war in Ukraine, just how vital the private sector can be. And one of the people Nina and Jay could feed their recommendations to is this guy, Greg Rattray.
In Taiwan, we would have the opportunity to pull together most of the major global cybersecurity companies.
Greg Rattray used to be the Chief Information Security Officer at J.P. Morgan Chase. He's also a retired Air Force officer. And he's been thinking a lot about how to apply the lessons of Ukraine to Taiwan. And he understands those lessons well because after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, he had an idea. He wanted to bring the private sector together to strengthen Ukraine's cyber defenses. And they called the program the Cyber Defense Assistance Collaborative, or CDAC. CDAC has helped Ukraine both defend against and recover from Russian cyber attacks. And to date, they've funneled about $40 million in voluntary cyber defense assistance from private companies to Ukraine. And now, Greg is turning his focus to Taiwan.
The stakes for the Taiwanese and its allies are very high, and therefore, even if the investments need to be very large in order to both deter that occurring or to be ready if the conflict occurs. There's a lot of work that could be done to make Taiwan stronger.
So how would you approach Taiwan differently than you would CDAC Ukraine?
I mean, the major difference stems from the fact that, in Taiwan, we would have the opportunity to plan more strategic, uplifts, focus more on projects that weren't delivering things, to be used tomorrow in face of attacks today.
And that's what he wishes could have happened in Ukraine. Instead of scrambling after the invasion, they could have built resilience before the war started. And in Taiwan, that's still possible.
In Taiwan, if we get in there now, have the relationships, an ongoing coordination process, we will be able to take the resources that are available and do a lot more to help the Taiwanese.
As for Nina and Jay, their next step is to bring the war game directly to Taiwan.
In April, we have been invited to play in Taipei at CyberSec 2025.
We'll be playing with, civilians, government, all those types of people.
Of course, the hope for Nina and Jay and Greg and everyone else keeping an eye on Taiwan is that these recommendations in case of war never need to be fully realized. But if they do, these exercises and these conversations and this work could make a big difference. It could get allies thinking, could get the private sector ready before it's too late. Because if this war game proved anything, it's that preparation isn't just a good idea, it's necessary. Because the world is changing and alliances are shifting.
Regardless of what happens on the kind of great power geopolitical stage, right? No matter how these alignments come or go, small countries have to figure out how to function. And so in that sense, we have to learn from any conflict that's out there. That's how we make our partners and allies more secure and better. And so I think, regardless of whether or not there's daylight between the U.S. government and the Ukrainians currently, we should learn from all the conflicts that are out there.
Because the next big conflict might not wait for us to be ready. This is Click Here.
If you're looking for a daily guide to cybersecurity news and policy, sign up for the Cyber Daily. from Recorded Future News. It serves up the day's most interesting and important cyber stories from our sister publication, The Record, and then aggregates all of the big cyber stories you might have missed from news outlets around the world. Just go to therecord.media and click on Cyber Daily to get all you need to know about the world of cybersecurity right in your inbox.
Today is Tuesday, March 25th, and here are some of the top cyber and intelligence stories of the past week. For years, the European Union has been threatening to rein in big tech, and now it's doing it with a vengeance.
Under new rules, Apple must let rival makers of devices like smartwatches and headsets access its tech and operating systems.
That means Apple can't keep its ecosystem so tightly locked, and Google, they're being accused of gaming their own search engine.
And Alphabet's Google was hit with 2 charges of breaking landmark EU rules. The rules here, as regulators are accusing the search giant of preferential treatment in its search and Google Play products.
It's all part of the EU's Digital Markets Act, passed in 2022, which is now being enforced with real consequences. And U.S. officials, they're not pleased.
As far as I'm concerned, it's a form of taxation. So we have some very big complaints with the EU.
Last month, the Trump administration warned that if American firms remain targets of EU regulation, there could be retaliation. Oleg Gordievsky passed away last week at the age of 86. He may be the world's most famous double agent. The son of 2 KGB officers, he was the perfect recruit for the Soviet Union, until he wasn't.
Gordievsky, former head of the KGB in London, who started collaborating with British intelligence in 1974. He was, by the early 80s, the most prized double agent working for the British.
He supplied vital intel, flipped Soviet spies, and played a huge role in the Cold War. Then he disappeared into the trunk of a car to Finland, and eventually the UK. Officials said Gordievsky died peacefully in his home in Sussex of natural causes. And finally, last week, the Trump administration released more than 2,000 files tied to the JFK assassination. But it wasn't the content that made the headlines.
Some serious security concerns over the newly released JFK files and real anger after Social Security numbers and other private information of more than 200 people were made public on Tuesday.
One of those affected, Joseph DeGenova. He's a former DOJ official, former Trump campaign lawyer, and former intelligence watchdog. Back in the 1970s, DeGenova was involved in the Church Committee, which investigated the misdeeds of the CIA and other U.S. intelligence agencies. Now he says he's taking legal action, suing the National Archives for doxing him.
Today's episode was produced by Zach Hirsch, Megan Dietrich, Erica Gaida, Sean Powers, and Dina Temple-Raston. It was edited by Karen Duffin, fact-checked by Darren Ankrum, and contains original music by Ben Livingston with some other music from Blue Dot Sessions. Our staff writer is Lucas Riley, and our illustrator is Megan Goff. Martin Peralta is our sound designer and engineer. Click Here is a production of Recorded Future News and PRX. Tune in on Friday for Mic Drop, which features our favorite interview of the week. We'll have a new episode of Click Here on Tuesday. We'll see you then.
If you're looking for a daily guide to cybersecurity news and policy, sign up for the Cyber Daily from Recorded Future News. It serves up the day's most interesting and important cyber stories from our sister publication, The Record, and then aggregates all of the big cyber stories you might have missed from news outlets around the world. Just go to therecord.media and click on Cyber Daily to get all you need to know about the world of cybersecurity right in your inbox.